The script actually worked this time. What's going on, everybody? How y'all doing? Mostly worked anyways. Don't think the, I got disconnected for some reason. Excuse me. Alright. Hey everybody, welcome to another exciting episode of the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup. I am the host and moderator of the Crowdsourced Politics podcast, Cypher, and today we have a lot of news coming your way because we were off last week due to me having a work function. Went out axe throwing and to dinner with colleagues. It was good fun, but we got to come back with some news. We're going to cover some things that we didn't get to cover last week, and we're going to cover the news of the week like we usually do. Before we get into that, we want to talk about some projects that we have coming up. So one of the things that we have coming up shortly is going to be the fact that we are going to be on probably a lot more panels going forward. That's one of the things that we've wanted to do for a while, and we're actually making inroads to some of the good panels that you all watch. Wick's show, Tiberius's show, maybe even Counterpoint's show. We'll see. So we're going to be doing that a lot more often. We're also going to get back into the swing of things of doing news clips of this kind of things while I walk the dogs, or anything that's kind of like under a minute, where I give a little tidbits here and there, as well as some TikTok videos. So we're going to be doing those as well. You can find those on our YouTube channel and Twitter, our YouTube channel and our TikTok channel. Another thing that we are going to do is that I am going to start doing video essays. I'm going to get back into doing podcasting, video essays. We're going to do some deep dives into some things that we need to cover for a variety of different topics. These are going to be kind of a mishmash between what you might expect to see on YouTube from some Twitch streamers, maybe Conure, some Shark Zero, what have you, those kind of people, right? Vosh, Lonerbox, etc. And a mix of maybe some frontline and some high-level documentary stuff. So be sure to be on the lookout for that. We're going to talk about some things, whether it be, better know Ron DeSantis, figuring out what his whole deal was. Maybe we'll talk about things like a particular government agency that does something that's really good that pretty much no one talks about, and how to use it. We're going to do a lot of different things like that. We're going to get back into doing Cypher State, and those are going to be more along those lines going forward, rather than being live kind of podcast shows. That's what we're going to be doing here. So that's what we wanted to let y'all know. Again, hey, if you can help us out, you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit that like button right now. It does help us out. So yeah. And so be sure to check out those shows as they come up. We'll have a schedule for those publishings. We'll be able to figure it out, find those on our shared calendar of when those are going to be published. We might even do some instant premieres so people can watch it together, but those are going to be another thing that we're going to do going forward from now on. So yeah, expect to see those. One other thing. I am going to Scotland at the end of April. So if there's anything that you want to see from a Scottish lens, if you want to see me interview people from Scotland about like American politics, if you want to see a particular site while I'm in Scotland, maybe talk a little bit about history from there, let me know. You can do that a number of different ways. You can let me know via, let's see, where is it at? You can let me know via our Discord server, which is obvious. That's an easy way to get a hold of us. And you can still let me know via Twitter at Crowdsourced Poll. Excuse me. So yeah, if you want to have anything particular to Scotland, let me know. I'll try to get a video of it and talk about it while in Scotland, or post Scotland, record some things in Scotland and bring them back here, do some video edits. One of the things that I will be doing is that I will be camping while I'm in Scotland. So I will record a video while I'm camping out in the Highlands, and yeah, we'll talk about some of the areas that I visit there. So let's go ahead then now and get into the show. All right, we get into it now. All right, today it marks the 365th day since Putin's invasion of the sovereign country of Ukraine, and we begin tonight's news roundup with updates from Ukraine. So President Biden visited Kyiv on Monday in a trip that was kept secret until he was on the ground in Ukraine. Ahead of the trip, the White House said that Biden would only make one stop at Warsaw, Poland. But under extraordinary secrecy, Biden left the White House a day ahead of schedule, flew to Poland, and arrived in Kyiv Monday morning after a 10-hour train ride. He traveled with just 2 journalists, 3 members of his staff, a White House photographer, and a small medical unit. President Biden risked his own safety in visiting a war zone where no American troops were present to assure it. The first time any U.S. president has done so. Analysts said that this is in and of itself a powerful statement that the administration Analysts said that this is itself a powerful statement that his administration is committed to Ukraine. Quote, "It was a gutsy move and to demonstrate Biden's personal commitment to supporting Ukraine," said Daniel Fried, a former U.S. ambassador to Poland. Continuing on, he said, "It's not the kind of thing a president does if he's looking to back out of supporting Ukraine. It's a way of demonstrating the opposite, that we're in this and we're in this to succeed." The Biden administration advised the Russian government of the trip in advance using deconfliction channels. As reported first by NBC News last March 22nd, the U.S. military established such channels to communicate directly with the Russian military as a way to deconflict tactical movements around Ukraine. The channels were established as U.S. military assets were deployed around Ukraine to shore up NATO ally defense. With the U.S. military operating in the area, there were concerns of a possibility of a close encounter that would lead to a miscalculation and escalation of the conflict. To mitigate this, the U.S. European Command set up a deconfliction mechanism with its counterparts at the Russian Ministry of Defense. The timing of Biden's visit before a planned address by Vladimir Putin was seen as a deliberate rebuke of the Russian president. Biden traveled back to Warsaw late on Monday evening when he met with Poland's President Duda and other NATO Eastern Flank officials. Let's turn now to a clip from President Biden's speech from a joint event in Warsaw.
One year into this war, Putin no longer doubts the strength of our coalition, but he still doubts our conviction, doubts our staying power, doubts our continued support for Ukraine.
I'm going to turn this up. I'm going to turn this up and restart it because it's lower than I was expecting.
Give her a round of applause.
There we go.
One year into this war, Putin no longer doubts the strength of our coalition, but he still doubts our conviction. He doubts our staying power, doubts our continued support for Ukraine. He doubts whether NATO can remain unified. But there should be no doubt. Our support for Ukraine will not waver. NATO will not be divided, and we will not tire.
I mean, this has been pretty much proven true since the onset of the war. So at least since Putin officially invaded eastern Ukraine. Officially meaning actual troops on the ground, a designated special operation, quote unquote. Maybe not since 2014 when Donbass started the civil war against Ukraine proper, but at least since that time. And it's given a lot of people more resolve to strengthen and shore up NATO against Russian aggression. And it kind of proved the point that NATO is still very much a necessary component to collective defense in Europe. It's pushed members to seek admission to NATO. That included, I believe, Sweden, and it included, I think, Finland as well. And it's made it to where European militaries are seeing more investment from their home countries in their own defense. So if Putin wanted to break the resolve of NATO to push America out of that, in order to kind of reassert itself inside a sphere of influence in Eastern Europe, that much has already objectively failed. Even if Putin were to maintain territory that he's taken over since the invasion, which is still right now not a sure thing to happen, it would still be a success from a Western standpoint. It would be a failure for Ukraine. It would be a somewhat of a win to Putin. But overall speaking, NATO got stronger, more military investments happened, and a united resolve against Russian aggression has been created from this. Well, let's continue on. There's about 5 minutes in this clip.
President Putin's craven lust for land and power will fail, and the Ukrainian people's love for their country will prevail.
True.
Democracies of the world will stand guard over freedom today, tomorrow, and forever.
Forever.
So that's what's at stake here. Freedom. That's the message I carried to Kyiv yesterday, directly to the people of Ukraine. When President Zelensky said he came to the United States in December, quote, he said, this struggle will define the world and what our children and grandchildren, how they live, and then their children and grandchildren. He wasn't only speaking about the children and grandchildren of Ukraine. He was speaking about all of our children and grandchildren, yours and mine.
I mean, it's a great rhetorical device in order to talk about this. And there's some truth to it, simply because if Russia were to succeed in its goals in Ukraine, there's no reason to assume it wouldn't do similar things in Moldova, Georgia, and eventually Poland. We can talk about history of wars, great power struggles, and how Poland has always been a corridor into Europe proper from Eastern Europe, from Russian aggression, and how it is always kind of seen as the first stand against Russian imperialism. But with how everything is gone, I think Biden's correct here.
We're seeing again today what the people of Poland and the people across Europe saw for decades.
See?
Appetites of the autocrat cannot be appeased. They must be opposed. Autocrats only understand one word: no, no, no.
I would have been like, autocrats only understand equal proportional force to prevent them from winning a territory. Something along those lines. Not no, because Putin was told no, and he's like, fuck you.
No, you will not take my country. No, you will not take my freedom. No, you will not take my future. I'll repeat tonight what I said last year in the same place. A dictator bent on rebuilding an empire will never be able to ease the people's love of liberty. Brutality will never grind down the will of the free. Ukraine will never be a victory for Russia. Never.
There we go. Yes, and I do understand that me agreeing with this is telling some conservative somewhere, oh, suddenly the left is pro-war. No. The left is pretty much anti-war. I am not a part of the left. Well, I am in an American standpoint, but I am not a leftist. But even that stated, this is an illegal war. This is a war of aggression. This is not a just war that Putin has inflicted upon the people of Ukraine. And if somebody knows anything about just war theory, check out the book if you don't know. Essentially, anytime aggression happens from an outside source, it gives other nations, other parties with the means to do so, to help push back against that force. Otherwise, you have the potential for more or less of other nations feeling like they can do the same thing and get their way through the use of force. So that makes it a moral obligation to stop said aggression. And I think leftists can kind of understand this. Look at what happened in Iraq. Look at what happened in Vietnam. Look at what happened when the United States does things in an improper way and not stop at it at all. We get mired in a quagmire conflict that goes on for decades, if not years, if not decades. And it always comes to bite the entire world in the ass because no one decided to stop it. So you should be like, hey, stop this one because similar thing's going to happen. So if you don't think that, then you're not exactly anti-war or anti-imperialism. You're just not wanting the United States to do anything. And that's not really a consistent position. That's really just a fuck everyone else. I'm an American. I don't care what anybody else does position when it comes to this.
For free people refuse to live in a world of hopelessness and darkness. No, this has been an extraordinary year in every sense. Extraordinary brutality from Russian forces and mercenaries. They've committed depravities, crimes against humanity.
True.
Without shame or compunction.
We have found, we as in the world, journalists, UN observers have found torture chambers inside Ukraine that have targeted Ukrainians for torture because the way the war is being executed by Russia. Again, some Russian soldiers are convinced that they're stopping Nazis. And if you're stopping Nazis, anything is fair game. Even torture, murder. Murder. Not talking about war killings. I'm talking about murder, civilians. Anything is proper in order to stop that. And that's what's been going on. Make no mistake of it.
They've targeted civilians with death and destruction. Used rape as a weapon of war. Stolen Ukrainian children in an attempt to steal Ukraine's future.
Filtrations have happened. And what that essentially means is that they have forcibly removed people, civilians, from Ukraine, filtered them back to Russia for some sort of education, some sort of processing in order to break the resolve of the Ukrainian people standing up against the Russian aggression. What that exactly entails is still not known yet. So don't be surprised if, 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, we hear of the atrocities that are being committed today, right now, as I speak.
Bomb train stations, maternity hospitals, schools, and orphanages. No one can turn away their eyes from the atrocities Russia is committing against the Ukrainian people. It's abhorrent. It's abhorrent. But extraordinarily, as well, has been the response of the Ukrainian people and the world. 1 year after the bombs began to fall, Russian tanks rolled into Ukraine. Ukraine is still independent and free. From Kherson to Kharkiv, Ukrainian fighters have reclaimed their land. More than 50% of the territory Russia held last year. The blue and the yellow flag of Ukraine proudly waves once again. President Zelensky still leads a democratically elected government that represents the will of the Ukrainian people. The world has already voted multiple times, including the United Nations General Assembly, to condemn Russia's aggression and support a just peace. Each time in the UN that vote.
A just peace in this instance is Russia leaving all of Ukraine. That's what he means by this. Whether or not that's actually what's going to happen depends on how the spring into the early summer campaigns work. I honestly don't expect this conflict to go on more than 3 or 4 years. So if this spring Ukrainians are able to either hold or make gains, as long as they don't lose anything in the spring, I foresee people nudging more to end the conflict. But that ending of the conflict is going to take, maybe a year or two in and of itself. So don't be surprised, though. Don't be surprised if that's what's going on.
It has been overwhelming. In October, 143 nations, the United Nations, condemned Russia's illegal annexation. Only four in the entire UN voted with Russia. 4. So tonight, I speak once more to the people of Russia. The United States and the nations of Europe do not seek to control or destroy Russia. The West was not plotting to attack Russia, as Putin said today. And millions of Russian citizens who only want to live in peace with their neighbors are not the enemy. This war was never necessity. It's a tragedy. President Putin chose this war. Every day the war continues is his choice.
True. 100% factual.
It's simple. If Russia stopped invading Ukraine, it would end the war. If Ukraine stopped defending itself against Russia, it would be the end of Ukraine.
We're going to stop it there. Now let's get back over to this. That. All right. So let's continue on now, though. So that was President Biden's remarks in Poland about what happened in Ukraine when he visited and why Ukraine matters to the Western world. But we have to continue on. And with that, Putin also spoke to the world. And he said he gave a long televised national address on Tuesday to the joint houses of the Russian parliament. In his speech, he blamed the West for starting the Ukraine war. Abject lie. The United States, Europe did not start this war. This war started in 2014 when Putin decided to arm rebels groups there. Putin also promised a new fund to help those who had lost loved ones in what he still refers to as Russia's special military operation in Ukraine. People in Russia are not buying this anymore, so they're having to be bought off with money for anybody that has been killed in this operation, in this war. Putin also claimed that the Ukrainian people had become hostages of their Western masters, who occupied the country in political, economic, and military terms. Again, trying to push the whole big bad narrative that the United States is just trying to dominate the world, and little old Russia over here is doing its best to just stand up to the big bad bully. In reality, Russia invaded. It's one of the things that I hate a lot about some of the leftists that we interact with, especially on Twitter and online, is that they want to talk about, how the U.S. provoked Russia into this conflict. They want to talk about how the United States gave all these signals of how, Russia couldn't actually defend itself, or that Russia was never fully safe. Okay, maybe that's true. Let's assume that that is true. That the United States have been 4 years targeting Russia. How does that justify invading another country? It doesn't. What it would justify is shoring up your own country's defenses, putting up barbed wire and other things like that. Similar to what North Korea does, maybe. Not that North Korea does it in a just way either, but I'm saying if it was something that simple, then it would justify Russia doing a number of different things, but it would never justify Russia invading another country in order to protect itself. That's bullshit. And it shouldn't be accepted. Continuing on, though, and most notably, Putin announced Russia would suspend the New START nuclear treaty with the United States. So what is the New START treaty? Let's go ahead and talk about it. So the treaty was signed by then President Barack Obama and his Russian counterpart, Dmitry Medvedev, in 2010. The New START treaty caps the number of strategic nuclear warheads that the United States and Russia can deploy. Together, the US and Russia own 90% of the world's nuclear weapons arsenal. In this context, deploy means ready for immediate use, rather than the number of weapons in storage, which are considered non-deployed. According to an explainer of the treaty written by the EU Parliament, quote, warheads count as deployed if loaded onto a missile that is itself deployed. In other words, if you have a warhead on a missile and that missile is in a missile silo and ready to launch or quickly be launched, it's considered deployed. If it's in storage, it's not. Now, under this agreement, Moscow and Washington are committed to deploying no more than 1,550 strategic nuclear warheads and a maximum of 700 long-range missiles and bombers. Each side can conduct up to 18 inspections of strategic nuclear weapon sites every year to ensure the other has not breached the treaty's limits. Excuse me. In other words, Russian inspectors can come to the United States and be like, okay, this looks good, and vice versa. The treaty came into full force in 2011 and was extended to 2021 for 5 more years after Joe Biden took office. Inspections under the agreement were put on hold in March 2020 because of the COVID pandemic. Talks between Moscow and Talks between Moscow and Washington on resuming inspections were due to take place in November of last year in Egypt, but Russia postponed them. Despite Putin's claim of suspension, the foreign ministry had said it would continue abiding by treaty's restrictions. However, a suspension of the treaty likely means that it will be harder for the US to monitor compliance. Experts say that it would be a serious blow if Putin went further and stopped routine reporting and data exchanges on nuclear weapon movements and other related developments. It's expected that the US will also suspend its obligations under the treaty, meaning that neither country will be able to verify compliance. So this is pretty important. Okay, this is important because it gave light to what was going on when it came to nuclear weapons, and there was not a full trust in that process, which is why it had the exchanges of inspectors. No sudden ages. And with that breaking down, we're not going to know what each country is doing when it comes to its nuclear weapons arsenals. And some of these things were probably a long time coming, but it's still one of those like, oof, I don't know, maybe we should reassess this. Maybe we should really get back into this. Maybe we should do things to get Putin to get back in. And I get that. I get people that are concerned about it because nobody wants to have to worry about nuclear war. It doesn't make me personally worried about nuclear war simply because I don't think Russia... It's not necessarily that Russia doesn't have the capacity to do a nuclear war. It's that right now, under the current conditions, I don't think anybody would actually follow through on an order to start one. On either side. On anybody's side. I don't think China would be involved in it. I don't think Pakistan would. I don't think India would. I don't think anybody actually wants this to happen. And unlike the Cold War, there isn't like just a bipolar world where everybody's on everybody's side. So if one person launches, everybody else launches. It's not going to be like that. So if Putin basically like, we're starting a nuclear war because you don't listen to me, right? And he puts off a tactical nuclear weapon airburst over Ukraine. I honestly think even China would be like, we're just going to take over Eastern Russia. I really think that what would happen. I really do. So I'm not really worried about this at all. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be worried about it. Your worry, your concern, your anxiety, justified in some respects. I just don't think it's necessary. And the air of around that being of a thing that might happen is just not there for me. So that's good. Well, let's continue on though. So, in other news, Belarus said on Tuesday that there was a significant grouping of Ukrainian troops massed near its own border and warned that this poses a threat to its security. Quote, At present, a significant grouping of the Ukrainian army is concentrated in the immediate vicinity of the Belarusian-Ukrainian section of the state border, the defense ministry said in a post on Telegram. Continuing on, the probability of armed provocation, which can escalate into border incidents, has been high for a long time, they added, and that it would take measures to adequately respond. ABC News then reported that Belarus's authoritarian president said that the ex-Soviet nation will form a new territorial defense force amid the fighting in neighboring Ukraine. President Alexander Lukashenko has cultivated close military ties with Russia, which used Belarusian territory to send troops into Ukraine. Russia also maintained that about 10,000 troops in Belarus, and the two countries have regularly conducted joint drills as part of their military's alliance. Speaking during a meeting with officials on Monday, Lukashenko said that a country needs to form paramilitary units in every town or village to serve as territorial defense to complement the country's 45,000 military in case of aggression. He added that every Belarusian man must learn how to handle weapons to protect his family and home if needed. Belarus's defense minister said Belarus will form a force of up to 150,000 volunteers who will be given weapons but keep their civilian jobs. So not being drafted into the military, being handed weapons in case of such need. He noted that its members will form a military reserve in peacetime and could act as guerrillas in case of war. While hailing the importance of defense cooperation with Russia and expressing support for the Kremlin's actions in Ukraine, Lukashenko emphasized that he will only send Belarusian troops into Ukraine if his country is attacked. Now, there's been worry in Belarus of Russia actually invading Belarus as well. So maybe this isn't necessarily about Ukraine. Just think on that. For its part, the US-based think tank, the Institute for the Study of War, warned that NATO must seriously plan for the likely future reality of a Russian-controlled Belarus. Vladimir Putin will, quote, very likely secure significant gains in restoring Russian control over Belarus and use it as a launching pad to further threaten Ukraine and NATO's eastern flank. Excuse me. Regardless of the outcome of his invasion of Ukraine, the ISW said in its latest update on the war. So there is that as well. And Lukashenko has known this for quite some time. He pretty much was forced to allow Russian troops into Belarus. There wasn't much he could do of it. He's not exactly a Putin puppet. He's not exactly free from the influences of Putin and what Russia wants to do. He's playing this weird balancing act between his own personal state interest in Belarus, the Russian interest of using Belarus as a launching pad for further aggression, as we just stated, as well as putting off of what Western forces or not forces, what Western countries want as well. Lukashenko is not somebody that is like democratically leaning or at all whatsoever. He's an autocrat. Okay. There's been numerous protests in Belarus against his regime, but right now he's kind of stuck in between a rock and a hard place. So he has to do some of these things. And him giving weapons to Belarusians in the guise of defending itself from Ukraine is probably actually kind of daring Putin to like try something. And if he does, he's going to be in a quagmire of his own making again. I think that's where that is for this. And finally, in our reporting on Ukraine, though, China's top diplomat, Wang Yi, met with Putin in Moscow with proposals for a political settlement to the war. Interesting. Talked about that earlier. In brief televised remarks, Wang said China and Russia were ready to deepen their strategic cooperation. Putin said that, quote, Russian-Chinese relations were proceeding as planned, and talked of reaching new milestones in areas such as bilateral trade. Putin said that the two countries had an ongoing cooperation in international affairs and expressed Russia's gratitude to China. Right, yeah, gratitude because China's buying your oil and maybe supplying you with things. Okay. Is someone becoming China's bitch? Like we reported on a while ago? I don't know. I'll let you be the judge of that. Continuing on, though, and over the weekend, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken warned against Beijing providing material support to Moscow's invasion, prompting China to tell the U.S. to keep out of its relationship with Russia. Quote, "We'd like a political solution to provide a peaceful and sustainable framework to Europe," Wang Yi said ahead of his visit during a stop in Hungary. And there was another thing that we wanted to bring up, and this was something that was reported on earlier today. Let me find this link here. There was hold on, I gotta find it again. Here we go. So coming out of Al Jazeera, and Al Jazeera does good reporting, even though they have a slight bent to a particular worldview. Let's see. What did he say? So, let's see. So, more ominously, China is now thinking of supplying Russia with weapons, said U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. Quote, "The concern that we have now is based on information we have that they have considering providing lethal support, and we've made very clear to them that that would cause a serious problem for us and in our relationship," Blinken told CBS News, speaking of on China. Blinken clarified that he was referring to weapons and ammunition specifically, but did not say which type of weapons, though. Quote, "It is the U.S., not China, that has been pouring weapons into the battlefield," shot back Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Wenbin the following day. The U.S. is not in a position to tell China what to do in regards to the Ukraine war. So tensions are a little high here. So we're seeing a more not necessarily aggressive China, but at the same time, it seems that China is it's not necessarily talking out of both sides of its mouth in this regard, but it seems that China has said that the war, according to Ian Bremmer, is that China's position on Ukraine is the war is illegal but provoked. They want an immediate ceasefire, no further arms to Ukraine or Russia, and most people will be looking to Xi Jinping's speech tomorrow on that resolve. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and this is a possible wrinkle in all the calculations that I have made about the war in Ukraine and other people have made as well, because people weren't expecting China to actually get more involved in this than they had been. There's been people on Twitter that are very close Chinese watchers, if not Chinese themselves, people being given the ability while in China to speak on Twitter on the behalf of the government or what have you, saying that, maybe Russia should just start buying weapons from China and China should just start selling weapons to Russia. It could happen. This could happen. And if that does happen, we'll be sure to tell you what to expect from it when it happens. We'll tell you why it's happening, how it's happening, and what to expect with the results from it happening. But with that, we do have to continue on with the news roundup. And hey, Mind of Oz, glad you are joining us today. Just got done reading or talking about Ukraine, and we're going to continue on with some additional news. Yeah, we're going to talk now about U.S. politics, starting up with the House of Representatives and cryptocurrency legislation. What's that all about? Well, let's go ahead and get into it. So according to the Cointelegraph, Minnesota Representative Tom Emmer has introduced legislation in the House that could limit the Federal Reserve from issuing a central bank digital currency, or CBDC. Announcing the legislation this week, Representative Emmer said that he had introduced the CBDC Anti-Surveillance State Act in an effort to protect Americans' right to financial privacy. According to the Minnesota lawmaker, the bill could prohibit the Fed from issuing a digital dollar directly to anyone, bar the central bank from implementing monetary policy based on a CBDC, and require transparency for projects related to a digital dollar. Why is this important? Well, as far as the way most cryptocurrencies work today, the entire exchange of a crypto, a token, whatever, is completely transparent. You can go onto the chain, look up somebody's wallet, and find every transaction they've made. Any money they've sent to somebody, any coin or token or whatever they've sent to somebody, and all the ones that they received and who they received it from. And with that, you can do neat little things like trace it down the line of where, like, hey, somebody sent one token to this person, that person sent it to another person, that person, and then looped it back around and the person received it again. Like, you can do things like that. And the concern here is that if the federal government, if the Federal Reserve goes over to a similar system, then there will be no financial privacy to exist within the system whatsoever. So think about, like, right now, if people want to hide what they're doing from the federal government, they can do a lot of business in cash. Cash is king in a lot of places. They're going to give you discounts for using it, whatever. The federal government doesn't have direct eyes on how those dollars are being spent. If it went to a digital only system, then it would end up being more traceable. And so there are legitimate concerns about that. I don't have those concerns because I'm a weirdo. I don't care about it. I understand people wanting privacy, and I'm not going to knock them from it. It's not one of those situations. I'm just telling you where my position is, and I don't care. It would be great to me if everybody's dollar was, like, open and honest and there was no money laundering or whatever. But I get it. I'm not going to knock people for thinking that this isn't a thing to be worried about. Continuing on, though, Emmer said, quote, "Any digital version of the dollar must uphold our American values of privacy, individual sovereignty, and free market competitiveness. Anything less opens the door to the development of a dangerous surveillance tool." And he's not entirely wrong. So if this bill passes in both the House and Senate and signed into law by President Joe Biden, the bill would amend the Federal Reserve Act to limit the Fed's authority with respect to central bank digital currencies. So that is the end of that segment. In more news coming out of the House, we have Cicilline retiring. So based on reporting from the Boston Globe and the Providence Journal, Democratic Representative David Cicilline announced this week that he will not complete his term in Congress and plans to resign in order to serve as the president and CEO of the Rhode Island Foundation. He'll leave Congress effective June 1st of 2023. His staff will continue to provide constituent services until a new representative is elected. In his new role, Cicilline will succeed Neil Steinberg, the longtime head of the Rhode Island Foundation, who is also retiring. The organization is known as the largest philanthropic organization in the state and a key influence in shaping public policy. Rhode Island law grants Governor Dan McNee the power to set the date of the special election to replace Cicilline, but the seat must be vacant in order to issue a formal writ of election. In other words, he has to officially retire, so this cannot be done until June 1st. That concludes that segment. And now we got not so much something really good, but something that a lot of people are going to end up being talking about in the coming days, weeks, as more information from this leak. Is it a leak? Not really a leak. Reveal comes out. Of course, it's going to be a lot of rehash of the conspiracies that we've seen over the last 2 years, 3 years at this point, actually. But what can you say? We're going to talk about it. And what are we talking about? Well, We're talking about the fact that Kevin McCarthy has gave Tucker Carlson a ton of videos. So what is that? Well, Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Republican of California, this week handed over to Tucker Carlson what is allegedly 41,000 hours of video from January 6th of 2021 and the Capitol insurrection. According to the Washington Post, Carlson said Monday night that his producers have been granted unfettered access to security video when hundreds of pro-Trump supporters stormed the Capitol to stop the certification of Joe Biden's Electoral College win. Quote, so there's about 44,000 hours, and we have, you may have read today, been granted access to that. We believe we have secured the right to see whatever we want to see. Our producers, some of the smartest producers, have been looking at this stuff and trying to figure out what it means and how it contradicts or not the story we've been told for more than 2 years. We think already in some ways that it does contradict that story, Carlson had said. The decision by McCarthy to provide the video to Carlson raised serious questions about whether the unedited, uncut video footage presented a national security risk. The video would reveal exactly where surveillance cameras are placed as well as the areas covered by those cameras. The January 6th committee was extremely careful in editing the footage used in its hearings for that and other security and privacy reasons. House Democrats expressed concerns about whether the release of the footage would force U.S. Capitol to change the location of security cameras. Honestly, I'm not worried about that. That's the least of the problems with this. They questioned why the speaker would give the material to Fox News host, who has peddled in conspiracy theories about the attack, and why it was released only to Tucker Carlson instead of being shared with other news organizations. That is the proper thing to be concerned with. So we know that Carlson has been around the block a time or two when it comes to peddling conspiratorial nonsense, objective falsehoods. In fact, Fox News is being sued right now by Dominion Voting for some of the things that Tucker Carlson himself has said, that he's admitted in writing as lies. And when I say in writing, I mean revealed email messages to the producers and key executives within Fox News. And of course, right? So why did McCarthy give it to Tucker Carlson? Well, because Tucker Carlson is his strongest soldier. Tucker Carlson is the person that you're going to give that dog a bone. He's going to get at it. He's going to doggedly just gnaw on that thing to get to the marrow. That is only going to expose things in a partisan light. Now, we can talk about whether or not maybe some more of that footage during the January 6th hearings should have been made public or not. That is a fair question. What is not fair, though, is to turn this over to a single source, a person that is not a journalist. They're a pundit. They're an opinion head. They are no different than what I am doing right now, other than the fact that they lie all the time, of course. So why should we trust anything that's going to come out of this? This is going to be one of those situations. What are you going to believe? What they tell you, or your lying eyes? And it's going to be your lying eyes that you believe, because it's going to be revealed in such a way to paint a narrative. It already has. When you go online and look up some of these videos of some of the things that supposedly have come out from this already, people are pointing to some people having earpieces in. I don't know about you, but a lot of people at the January 6th place were old. They had hearing aids. Maybe some of those security phones were just hearing aids. They look similar. They really do. That's one. Two. Okay, let's assume that some people were actually agent provocateurs. Okay? Arrest them. Does it change anything? How does it change anything? Did people still break the law? Were there people there still trying to break in and stop a due function of Congress from enacting the will of the American people? The answer is yes. So why should I care well, I care. Of course I care. But I'm saying, how does it materially change what happened during January 6th? I don't think it does. I don't think anybody should assume that it does. And that is what we have to contend with here. And as you know, Tucker Carlson is a liar. Straight up. Lying piece of crap. This isn't defamation. This is provable. He said it himself. They argued it in court that we're just Fox News opinion late night or prime time is not a proper news show. It is opinion show and we give opinions here. Meanwhile, they say they report the news for the people. And then at the same time, we're lying out of our asses in internal communications. What is it going to be? What is it going to be? I think honestly, no one should really, honestly, I don't know if we'll even report on any of the crazy stuff that comes out of these things. Unless there's something really damning that comes up or something that just absolutely we can't ignore. Okay. I'm not going to cover, I don't think we're going to cover much of that because we've already covered a lot of it. There's not going to be anything new revealed. In my opinion, as of right now, there's not going to be anything new revealed in these things. It's going to be the same reheated turd of conspiracy theories all over again that we've heard for the last 2 years with some footage to back it up. But yeah, that's what I think is going on here. And I don't see any reason to think otherwise. But with that, that concludes our segment on the Tucker Carlson thing. So now let's go ahead and get into the Senate. So the Senate was in recess this week. So there's just a couple of items of news to cover in this segment. In reporting from the Gazette and ABC News, Fetterman checked himself into Walter Reed National Military Medical Center last week to seek treatment for clinical depression. He was evaluated last Monday by the attending physician of Congress who recommended inpatient care at Walter Reed. Post-stroke depression is very common, with 1 in 3 stroke patients suffering from it, and it's treatable through antidepressant medication and counseling, according to doctors. Fetterman's campaign in October released a letter from the Pittsburgh area physician who said his exhibited no effects on his cognitive ability or his ability to think and reason after the stroke, was recovering well, and, quote, can work full duty in public office. Dr. Eric Lindsay, head of the Dr. Eric Lindsay, head of the psychiatry department of Washington University in St. Louis, said it is heroic that the major political figure admitted to being treated for depression instead of trying to hide it. Quote, it's when people admit to it, we start to see a reduction in the stigma around mental illness. I'm glad he admitted it, and I find it to be a brave thing to do, Lindsay said. Senators from both parties were supportive after Fetterman's office announced the news, applauding him and getting help and acknowledging that he needed it. Meanwhile, Twitter stuff is just on Twitter. Just in Twitter. Jeez. I'm sorry, Nikki, what new stuff is covered in news bites? Oh, you're just letting me know there's more stuff in there now? Don't worry, we'll cut it out. I'll see your comment in a minute. But, of course, a lot of pundits on Twitter, the ghouls that they are trying to say that Fetterman was not fit for office entirely. And this is just another reason why he shouldn't have ran in the first place. So basically, you're saying anybody in the United States shouldn't run for Congress. That's what I'm hearing when you say stuff like this. He's getting the help he needs. He's, by all accounts, there has been no indication that he's not able to think and process information cognitively. He has issues with hearing, which is common after a stroke. But as far as interacting with his colleagues and making banter and being able to do the work of Congress, which is, analyzing bills, analyzing things, and writing bills, and debating, even though he's using right now a tablet to do so, is there. It's all there. His colleagues have said it. His detractors in Congress have said it. His psychiatrist has said it. His doctors said it. Everybody said it. There's no reason to believe that he's not able to do it. The depression that he's experiencing now is partly something he's probably had for a long time, according to some reports, but also the obvious consequence of surviving a stroke and not recovering as quickly as one wants to be able to recover. So good on Fetterman for seeking the help that he needs, and I hope that he's able to still do his job, and we'll see him in Congress in the future. So that concludes our segment on Fetterman. In other news, and this is about the Ukraine visit, but kind of. Many Republicans have criticized President Biden for going to Kyiv, Poland, instead of touring the train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. But Senator Lindsey Graham lauded the trip. The Republican senator of South Carolina praised President Biden's surprise visit to Ukraine on Monday, saying that the trip to the war-torn country was the right signal to send at the right time, according to The Hill. Quote, "I am very pleased that President Biden took the time to visit Ukraine and meet with President Zelensky," Graham said in a statement. "This was the right signal to send at the right time. A president visit to Ukraine, along with the statements made by Vice President Harris at the Munich Society conference that Russia is committing crimes against humanity in Ukraine, are a powerful combination," Graham stated. Graham's referenced Harris's comments to Germany last week, in which she said that the U.S. had formally determined that Russia has committed crimes against humanity in its invasion of Ukraine. And while Biden announced $500 million more in support to Ukraine on his visit, Graham called for the administration to go further in backing of Ukraine. He said that the U.S. should send advanced fighter jets and designate Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. Continuing on, he stated, quote, "For the visits and statements to matter to their fullest extent, decisive action must immediately follow. We must designate Russia a state sponsor of terrorism under U.S. law. That would also help ensure that any lethal assistance to Russia provided by China is devastating to the Chinese economy. We would start immediately training Ukrainian pilots and maintainers and provide them with advanced fighters to not only win this war, but deter future aggression," Graham stated. And that concludes our comments about the Senate. So if you're just now joining us, or you want to see us if you're just now joining us, welcome everybody. Thank you all so much for being here. It really does help us out, and we're glad that you're all having a good time with us on this Thursday evening. We do this every Thursday, starting roughly about 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to roughly about 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, unless stated otherwise. Vacations, work events, what have you. Try to do this every week. Sometimes we can't make it. But hey, thank you for joining. If you have news that you want us to see us cover, if you have news you want to see us cover on the Roundup, or if you'd like to join one of our panels, here's how to let us know. First up, you can join our Discord. Links above or below, depending on where you're watching this. Trying to build up the Discord, trying to have a good community over there. It's pretty small, several active people, but it's always pretty much a good time. You can also find us on Facebook. Yes, we're Facebook people. We're elder millennials here. And you can find us there at the Commons. So for our group is called the Tribune Commons, and also the Crowdsourced Tribune as the Facebook page. And we know everybody still uses Twitter despite what Elon Musk is doing, so you can still reach us at Twitter at Crowdsourced Poll on Twitter. So let's go ahead and get more into news. And today, and of course, we have to talk about the Ohio train derailment. We're going to cover what's happened and what is currently happening. What are some of the political narratives about what has happened? well as some other things. Let's go ahead and get into it. On February 3rd in East Palestine, Ohio, a Norfolk Southern freight train carrying several cars of vinyl chloride and other toxic chemicals derailed. There's lots to talk about here, so let's jump right into it. First up, let's turn over to this video coming from Weather Channel. Assuming it plays. Oh, of course. There's no point in doing... Seriously? Okay, we're gonna mute this really quick. Oh, come on. What is the point of like preloading videos? There's none, I swear. All right. While this loads, we'll be shit. Maybe it isn't me. I have no idea where you're located, so no, we don't. LOL. I don't know what that means. All right. So we're going to turn over to this video now from the Weather Channel, and it's going to show us some of the things that that happened in the lead up to the train derailment. What, another ad? All I did was maximize it. Kidding me? Wow. All right, we're not going to maximize it. We're just going to, I swear to God, if it replays.
Train carrying hazardous chemicals that derailed in Ohio may have been on fire for miles before the incident.
That's nuts.
This security camera video from February 3rd shows what appears to be flames and sparks coming from one of the train's axles, according to the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette.
Wow.
About 40 minutes later, and 20 miles down the tracks, 38 cars from the train crashed off the tracks, with some erupting in flames that sent a black cloud of smoke high into the air. Hundreds of local residents were evacuated and kept away from the area for days as officials monitored air quality and carried out a controlled release of chemicals from some of the cars to prevent an explosion.
All right, so that's we know what's gone on, so we're going to talk more about it. All right. So first responders quickly found evidence that one of the train cars was releasing vinyl chloride, a highly flammable and known carcinogen. Shortly after the crash, crews released toxic chemicals into the air from 5 derailed tanker cars that were in danger of exploding. A controlled burn in which the vinyl chloride was slowly released from 5 rail cars created a large plume above the village of East Palestine. The NTSB reported that before the derailment, an alarm indicating a mechanical issue was set off, which caused the train to apply its emergency brakes. Now, the disaster has led to a misinformation and conspiracy theories circulating online, and some members of Congress, plus a 2024 candidate for office, wasted no time in twisting this derailment to fit political narratives. The result has been weeks of quick clickbait headlines. The Roundup takes its responsibility to accurately report the news. So once again, we went behind the headlines where the facts live and clickbait dies. First, Republicans criticized the Biden administration, claiming that the federal government has completely ignored the event. The fact is that the appropriate federal agencies did respond, with the EPA and other rapid response agencies on the ground immediately. Fox News claimed that Biden refused to mobilize FEMA. While it's true that FEMA is not on the ground, FEMA is not the agency responsible for this kind of disaster. Again, lots of people don't understand what functions, what proper government agencies handle what functions. People say this is a disaster, so FEMA's got to be involved. No, this is a Department of Transportation, an EPA level disaster. So those are the agencies that are involved. Which is, it makes sense, right? We really don't teach how government works within the United States education system pretty much at all. So this is one of those messaging things that is going to make a lot of sense. Like, people are really not understanding who is and is not in charge of certain situations. So I don't begrudge anybody for not knowing this. Hell, I didn't know it until we started researching about it, okay? So there is that. So as reported in The Independent, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine told reporters last week that Biden had spoken to him after derailment and offered federal assistance. Said DeWine at a news briefing, quote, "Look, the president called me and said, anything you need. I have not called him back after that conversation. We will not hesitate to do that if we're seeing a problem or anything, but I am not seeing it right now." Indicating right now, he means. Then, on February 16th, DeWine did request further federal aid in response to the crash, which the White House immediately provided in the form of interagency mobilization to the village of East Palestine. Quote, "Today, in response to Governor DeWine's and Ohio's congressional delegation request for additional federal public health support, the Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, announced that they are deploying a team of medical personnel and toxologists to conduct public health testing and assessments," the White House said in a statement. Continuing on, it stated, quote, "The team will support federal, state, and local officials already on the ground to evaluate individuals who were exposed or potentially exposed to chemicals and help ensure timely communications to the public." On Tuesday of this week, EPA Administrator Michael Regan announced that the agency was taking over the cleanup operation and would use a binding odor to ensure that let me state that again. So on Tuesday of this week, EPA Administrator Michael Regan announced that the agency was taking over the cleanup operation and would use a binding order to ensure that Norfolk Southern continues to rectify the accident under penalty of fine. The allegations that the federal government has done nothing are obviously not true. President Biden has not yet visited the site, because doing so would have created a distraction that required local officials and workers taking their focus off of the disaster. Historically speaking, presidents avoid visiting disaster sites until doing so would not be a distraction. And this should be obvious. There is a long thing, there's a lot of things that are required for a presidential visit. Security, coordinating with government, the local government, photo op, all that stuff, right? They can just get in the way. That isn't to say that this has been handled perfectly. Don't get it twisted. But it is to say that that is why, typically speaking, they don't visit until after things are put in place in order to address the immediate need. So a visit by the president would have no value to the teams or to the town. Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg toured the site for the first time today, which, to be fair, is a bit later than expected. So on the Democratic side of the aisle, the headlines allege that the former President Trump killed Obama-era train safety regulations that would have made a difference in this particular derailment. It's true that the Department of Transportation repealed a train safety rule in 2018 that required installing electronically controlled pneumatic brakes, or ECPs, on trains that carried highly flammable hazardous material, including crude oil. Would ECP brakes have made a difference in this derailment? The answer is that while the brakes would have likely lessened the severity of the crash, the Obama-era rule applied only to trains that carried crude oil. Class 2 flammable gases, such as liquefied petroleum gas and chemicals, including vinyl chloride, were not covered in that rule. So even if the regulation had been left in place, ECP brakes would likely not have been on the Norfolk Southern train. So maybe we need to expand the regulations in general. We're using basically a cascading brake system where you brake one car and then the next car and the next car, so on and so forth, instead of like strategically, electronically, like, hey, we got to brake these 3 cars at the same time and then we can slow down. Like, it's like a cascading thing. It's ridiculous. And this is pre-Civil War era things. We'll get to your comments. Maybe it isn't me in a second. But yeah, the issue with the brake system might not have stopped this because the rule did not include these trains. There's other rules that probably need to be put in place, and that should be part of the investigation that should happen in Congress after all this is said and done. Next up, we're going to talk about the Trump visit. See, we know what you're wanting to hear. So finally, in a performative politics arena, there's Donald Trump himself, who turned the disaster into an opportunity to campaign. Let no good disaster go wasted. Let no good crisis go to waste. In keeping with what we've come to expect, his visit to the state was bizarre and awkward. In a rambling 16-minute speech before a small gathering of locals, Trump careened through several alternative facts. He claimed that absolutely no one from the federal government or Norfolk Southern showed up until he and Senator J.D. Vance announced they were going to visit the site this past Tuesday. Objectively bullshit. He then echoed Fox News, saying that the lack of response from FEMA was terrible, and immediately contradicted himself when he said that FEMA is not the proper agency for the derailment, because it's not. Next up was a strange comparison to football, and we'll turn over to that now.
You know, it reminded me a little bit, I don't know if you remember when Ohio State wasn't going to be playing football for another season. They were going to sit back and watch with the China virus or COVID, whatever you want to call it. And I called the head of the Big Ten football. I said, you got to get this football open. And they were great. They responded, and Ohio State played that season.
Okay.
Nobody remembers that, I think, right? Does anybody know? You got at least one. You could be close.
Okay.
By now, you still would be close, probably. But we got that open very early, and you had a great season of football, to put it mildly. So that was a very good honor.
Everything Trump touches is going to shit.
To most of the rest of football in the country, but you led it through Ohio State and Big Ten. And we got that done. I did that very personally. I called the commissioner, and he did a good job.
So this is Trump basically trying to relate to the people of Ohio by saying, hey, look, you know, like, I did this before for you guys before. Now I'm going to do it again. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. I don't know, man. This is just ridiculous. Like, how are you gonna do that? Are you gonna be like, you know, I got the football games back going? Come on, dude. Come on. But of course, there's more. Let's listen to this next bit.
Especially thank some of the incredible people that helped us, because we're bringing thousands of bottles of water, Trump water, actually, most of it. Some of it we had to go to a much lesser quality water. You want to get those Trump bottles, I think, more than anybody else. But we're bringing a lot of water, thousands of bottles, especially thanks.
So this Trump water thing, I'm pretty sure it was discontinued because of like listeria, like it made people get explosive diarrhea or something. Discontinued because of sickness. Pretty sure that's the case. Trump criticized federal blah blah blah. No, I want Trump water. Trump water. Don't give me all this bullshit. What is this? Mocked for boasting about? Yeah, let's go to promises thousands of bottles of Trump water. We got all the Trump butter water. Go all the Trump ice. Oh, here we go. Here's what it was called. Oh, look. Man, nothing beats the aesthetic of 80s Trump though, right? Like 80s, 90s, early 2000s Trump. Look at that. Look at that hair. Isn't it gorgeous? Anyways. So, Trump Ice natural spring water, often referred to as just Trump Ice, was a bottled water owned by American businessman Donald Trump. It was discontinued in 2010. Despite this, Trump continues to produce the brand to be used in his restaurants, though it is no longer used commercially for individual sale. spring water, 12 ounce, 5 gallons. Apprentice was previously the brand was discontinued, but Trump spring water is still. He basically puts his brand on something else, like he always does. He doesn't produce this anymore. Someone actually delivered rival Marco Rubio. Bro, that's pretty funny. That's pretty funny. Okay, so I was wrong about the reason for discontinuation, so I apologize, and I will probably edit that out of the recap. But yeah, funny stuff. Anyways, let's continue on though. So what happened with the aftermath of this train derailment? So based on reporting from the Washington Post, the full effect of the derailment and chemical release is not yet known. In addition to the contaminated soil and water being removed, chemicals also leaked into local waterways and went into the air. This is devastating. There's likely to be consequences of this for the people of East Palestine for years to come. Even though the town was evacuated fairly quickly, people had to go back in order to get like medicines and pets and things like that. And they had to drive through while the smoke was being released and put on fire. And it is going to probably lead to some negative health effects. It really is. It's as sad as it is to say. And experts have said that it will take time, though, to determine whether there is lasting contamination in the soil and water. Norfolk Southern contractors and state and local agencies have already carried out some emergency cleanup. Crews have been digging up a 1,000-foot swath around the tracks and pumping out water. State officials said last week that at least 15,000 pounds of contaminated soil and 1.1 million gallons of tainted water have been removed. Some of that water is going to be reprocessed actually in Texas. A federal team this week opened a health clinic for residents. Some have complained of headaches, nausea, dizziness since returning to their homes. Secretary Buttigieg said that his department would begin a round of inspections on trains and train routes used for transporting hazardous material and called for the rail industry to implement new safety measures. These should not be called on the rail agencies to do this. These should just come in the form of regulations. Pete Buttigieg, you're not doing too well on this, man. Not doing too well. So in addition, though, Pennsylvania's environmental agency has made a criminal referral against Norfolk Southern to the state attorney general, said Governor Josh Shapiro, Democrat of Pennsylvania, where residents over the Ohio border were also affected by the toxic emissions. Governor DeWine said the state attorney general planned to take the appropriate action as well. Now, I know I got comments in here, so we're going to get to some of these comments. And first up, we got Maybe It Isn't Me saying, quote, "I can never understand why people bitch about non-visits by presidents. We should all know that they bring a circus that does no good." True. But I do want to comment about that a bit. This is, in my mind, an unforced error by Biden to a degree. I don't watch the news as much as I used to. I read a lot about the news, and I get some like smithereens of reporting from like Twitter and Facebook. I have not seen Biden talk much about this. So I think he probably should have said more, personally, But it's not so much what he's done necessarily. It's how the Department of Transportation has handled this in regards to what kind of regulations need to be re-implemented. We talked about the 2018 regulation that was discontinued. It might not have had affected this particular train car because it was gutted beforehand. Whether that should be included in a new sphere of regulations or not. We can also talk about how the government messages on these things. Governments come in, started testing the air. The air seems to be clean, so people were allowed back into their homes. But that doesn't mean that their homes are clean, right? And Norfolk Southern has disincentives to be honest about it. If it shows to be a thing of the air quality not being good, or if people's homes being negatively impacted, etc. So I think Biden could have done a bit more to assuage the reasonable fears that people in East Palestine have about what's happening and become out more forceful against Norfolk Southern, as well as some other companies that have skirted regulations and not done their due diligence when it comes to ensuring that national infrastructure that's privately owned, some of these rail lines are privately owned, are maintained. So that's one thing. And when you said, maybe it isn't me, also said, followed up with, Trump was just playing sort of smart politics. If Biden wasn't in Ukraine, I'm sure he would have rushed to get there. I believe you're 100% correct on that as well. I don't know what you mean by that next comment. Maybe it isn't me. Sorry. But I do think that Trump is basically playing good politics here. He is assuring Ohio that in his administration, which we know is not true, but if you say it enough, people are going to believe it and at least feel like they're being heard, even if things aren't being done, because they trust you. People in Ohio probably just don't trust Democrats all that much. Democrats need to do things in order to gain their trust. Posting on Twitter saying this is the votes that you get is not helping. If you are a liberal or lefty that says East Palestine voted for deregulation and this is kind of the consequences of that, I understand. I probably made a similar comment myself. We aren't helping when we say this. We can say it in a different way. We're like, people of East Palestine have undergone a tragic thing that might have health consequences for the foreseeable future. They need to be taken care of, and it's the government's job to ensure that that's being done. Deregulation is not the answer. Don't vote for deregulation, because we're not going to be able to regulate properly if people that don't like regulation are put in power. I think that would be a better way to say something like this. But you tell me. You tell me if I'm wrong. I don't think I am, but I'm open to criticism, and that's one of the things that I'm very much, everybody can tell you in this space, that I am very open to criticism. I will argue my point to the death while I'm arguing it. Afterwards, I'm going to reassess and be like, okay, did I make my arguments well? Did they make arguments well? Do I need to readjust my view with this thing? And in real time, you've probably seen me argue with people. I'm like, oh, I didn't think of it that way. I'm going to have to think about that. So that's one of the things, though. I do think that we need to talk about these issues in a better light. It's kind of our job as being liberal, as being lefties, to make our positions palatable to people that aren't. And by that, I mean, I don't mean like, oh, we got to like appeal to right wingers in a way that they'll like, you know, throw somebody under the bus to get them. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about talking to people in a kind manner in order to make them understand that we care about their actual issues, the ones that are real, and that we're going to address those issues at the root, not being distracted with some other bullshit. Of course he did. Yeah, this is, again, like Nikki, I guess this happened just recently. So Nikki said, oh my God, Rudy Giuliani just landed in East Palestine, for fuck's sake. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. They're all going to be there. They're all going to be there because Democrats are not, right? Democrats, the key Democratic leaders are not, and it's an easy win for them. Yeah, maybe it's me. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Quote, so maybe it's me said, I understand what you mean. We need to put our arms around them and help them and teach them at the same time, not looking down on them. Yes, exactly. There are times where I call out a dismissive or the dismissal, a rebuke is necessary. I'm not saying it's not necessary. There are times where it is, but saying just be like, you voted for it, you fucking idiots. That's not it, man. That's not helping anybody. That causes people just to entrench into their ideas and make you look like a piece of shit. A giant prick that just needs to be popped. Okay? So we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't do that at all. But that concludes that segment on that. I'm glad everybody's watching. Glad we're having some engagement tonight. I appreciate it. Appreciate it. So we got to continue on. We got to continue on with the news roundup, and we're going to now move over. We're going to now move over to some SCOTUS news. We're going to talk about Section 230. What is Section 230? Why are we talking about it? What's the Supreme Court dealing with all this? Let's get into it now. So the Supreme Court heard oral arguments this week in the case of Gonzalez versus Google and Twitter versus Tom Ney to determine if YouTube and Twitter are liable for terrorism-related content hosted on their platforms. The relevant statute in question is Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act of 1996. Section 230 recognizes that the internet and the services on it give Americans access to diversity of political discourse, cultural development, and intellectual activity. It states that the internet should remain free from government regulations so that it and free speech can flourish. Services like YouTube and Twitter are free to moderate user content and speech according to their own guidelines, even under Section 230. This is not a section about publishers versus non-publishers. Okay? Section 230 is basically saying that let's go ahead and turn over to SCOTUS blog to give us a good review about that. And then I'll just sprinkle some of my own opinions in it while it happens. Let's go ahead and let it roll.
Tomorrow morning, the Supreme Court is going to hear a case.
Okay, so that's loud. I'm going to head turn that down a little bit.
Tomorrow morning, the Supreme Court is going to hear a case about Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. That law was passed back in 1996 in part to protect the infant internet at the time, right around the time we were talking about the internet like this.
What is internet anyway?
Internet is that massive computer network, the one that's becoming really big now.
It's a series of tubes.
What do you mean? That's big. How does one? What do you write to it like mail?
No, a lot of people use it and communicate with. I guess they can communicate with NBC writers and producers. Allison, can you explain what internet is?
So the law protects internet service providers.
Oh, such a simpler time where all of us were asking ASL on AOL Instant Messenger. AOLIM. Yes. Such a simpler time.
From being held responsible legally for things that other people post on their websites. And again, this was passed way back in the day of America Online and bulletin boards, but the law applies today to a much broader swath of service providers, including apps like Google and Facebook. The case is being brought by the family of a 23-year-old American woman.
Okay, so before she gets into that, let's expand upon Section 230 a little bit more. So, as she said, Section 230 does not hold content post for the things that people post underneath them. So, in the age of the bulletin boards and AOL Instant Messenger, anything that was said on these platforms could not hold AOL criminally liable for anything that's happened, nor civilly liable for it either. Without these rules, it should be really stated here that without these rules, the internet as we know it could not exist. A lot of conservatives want to see Section 230 to go away because they believe that it is what prevents them suing Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, whatever, social media giants. It is what prevents them from being able to have a fair say on the internet. They're wrong. Section 230 does not give them protection against this. What Section 230 does allow is for somebody to go on Twitter and make a defamatory statement against somebody else, and for Twitter to not be held liable for that defamatory statement. So if Joe Schmo comes out and says, "Hey, Cypher, I think you're a giant piece of crap because you robbed a store when you were 32 and killed somebody." Okay. All of these are provable nonsense, right? I never committed murder in my life. If I wanted to read, let's say that tweet went viral and my reputation was harmed for that. Who would I sue? Well, because of Section 230, I could only sue the person that made that statement, maybe the people that tweeted it and retweeted it or what have you, but I could not sue Twitter over it. If Section 230 is repealed, I would be able to sue Twitter over it. What is going to be the natural outcome of doing this? Well, a lot more content moderation. Way worse than content moderation we're seeing now. You think Facebook content moderation is bad with its inability to differentiate between jokes and the like? Wait until Section 230 is repealed. You won't even be able to post anything negative. It'll just be puppies and rainbows. All for the eyes could see. No more calling people dumb. No more saying that a politician is bad. None of it. It would all have to go away. Because somebody would get a wild hair up their ass and decide to sue Facebook because somebody was mean to them. It would just get worse. Now, that's what happens if Section 230 is gotten rid of. But the cases that are being talked about here are a little bit different. These aren't necessarily strict Section 230 cases. We're going to turn back over to SCOTUS blog here to let them finish about what these cases entail and then talk about it a little bit more. I'm going to rewind it a sec here. Get it to, there we go.
The case is being brought by the family of a 23-year-old American woman who was one of 130 people killed in a 2015 ISIS attack in Paris. Her name was Nohemi Gonzalez. The family is suing Google, who owns YouTube, and they claim that YouTube aided and abetted terrorism because YouTube's algorithm recommended ISIS recruitment videos on its platform.
Okay, so this is different than strict Section 230 defenses, because what this is doing is that this is the algorithm recommending content to people based on its virality or its relevance to you, using proprietary information, proprietary code in order to keep it going, so to speak. So there is a needle that the Supreme Court can thread here, where it won't completely overturn Section 230, but would fundamentally change how the internet works, because we are all used to content curation. Let's talk about content curation. So the way social media talks about content curation versus content moderation is that content curation is the idea that we are trying to give you the best service that we can to make videos, post, what have you, show up that you're more likely to engage with and have an enjoyable experience. That is content curation. Content moderation is the bans, the preventing of posting on platforms, that sort of thing. This would impact directly content curation. So what this could do is that it would open up if the Supreme Court rules in favor of the plaintiff here, that they are allowed to sue Google over this, expect more moderation to happen due to this, because they wouldn't want their, so one, expect more moderation because it's going to be easier to moderate something and stop it at the source, to prevent it from ever being accidentally curated and boosted. So there's probably going to be more moderation, but also expect content curation to not generate virality for people's videos and posts and whatever, if it could be construed to be against a particular group of people or what have you, and could cause violence or some sort of material harm, including to a person's reputation, if it went viral. Because then that is the curation, that is the virality, that is the algorithm of the platform promoting a particular narrative. So regardless of how this case is ruled, if they thread the needle at all, it will fundamentally change how we use social media and large sections of the internet, including search, such as Google, and new search and that sort of thing, such as ChatGPT. So this case is huge. It is very important. It is very important. And that's why we're talking about it. We're going to turn back over now to SCOTUS blog to finish up on this. And I'm sure it might mention some of the things that I just discussed, but it's important that it gets called out directly, because that is what they're asking for when they say things like get rid of Section 230 or change how these platforms can moderate within the realm, in the guides of Section 230.
A divided panel on the Ninth Circuit said that Section 230 does cover those types of algorithmic recommendations so long as the provider's algorithm treats content on its platform similarly. The Ninth Circuit also acknowledged that Section 230 covers way more than Congress originally envisioned, but said that Congress should really be the ones to decide how far to extend Section 230 to protect internet companies, not the courts. Oral argument begins tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., and you can listen live on the Supreme Court's website if you're curious.
All
tomorrow
right. So that is that on that segment. So there is a part 2 to Section 230, which we are going to turn over to now as well. It is also from SCOTUS blog. Let's go ahead and get over to that.
Part 2. Today, the Supreme Court heard oral argument for almost 3 hours in Twitter v. Tamne about whether Twitter can be held responsible for aiding and abetting terrorism. The family of Naras al-Assaf, a Jordanian citizen who was killed in a 2017 ISIS attack in Istanbul, claims that Twitter and other companies aided ISIS by giving them access to their platform that ISIS used to help recruit new members. The justices mulled what constitutes.
So this would be direct Section 230 violations. The other one is more of a direct, indirect Section 230 kind of thing. This is more directly regarded to Section 230. That's why both of these cases are very important. Covered enough of it so you understand what we're talking about, so we're going to let her continue on, but I just wanted to point that out, that this is different than the other case simply because they are allowing people to be on the platform. Conservatives are playing with fire when they talk about making Section 230 go away, because a lot of people would, a lot of conservatives would be out of the internet for some of the stuff that they post, especially post about violence, which a lot of them do. Remember, watering the tree of liberty with the tyrants kind of stuff would be eliminated from the internet. It would. It's too much of a risk. Too many people, too many lawsuits. It's how Alex Jones got sued for defamation. Picture that happening because somebody decided to get a higher up their ass, post something stupid on Twitter, and then Twitter got sued out of existence. It won't stand for it.
Constitutes aiding and abetting, and the law says knowingly providing substantial assistance to someone who commits an act of international terrorism. But what does that mean? What if you give Osama bin Laden a cell phone? Is that aiding and abetting? Or do you have to know that he's going to use that phone in the commission of a terrorist attack? Is a cell phone substantial assistance? What about providing cell phone service?
Yeah, all these are very good questions to ask. I'm glad that the justices have asked it.
Justices used a lot of hypotheticals to really parse the contours of the law here, and they seemed skeptical of holding Twitter responsible in this case in particular because the complaint doesn't have any specific allegations about individual accounts or users who were involved in this specific terrorist attack. Twitter's lawyer, Seth Waxman, cautioned the justices that holding Twitter responsible for failing to remove every single ISIS account on its platform could mean that Twitter would be held responsible for every single terrorist attack. And not just
correct. That was where this would go.
Twitter, but any company that provides an automated service at an arm's length to a customer. And Justices Brett Kavanaugh and Ketanji Brown Jackson echoed similar concerns. Another question was whether assistance.
Don't be surprised that the Supreme Court has not necessarily unanimous decision on this, but a clear majority that has liberals involved in it as well.
A criminal or terrorist enterprise as a whole is enough, which might be bad for Twitter if they give ISIS a platform to, as a whole, recruit new members. or whether the law requires tying the aiding and abetting action to a specific terrorist attack, like the one in the Istanbul nightclub. A majority of the justices sounded comfortable with the idea that the aiding and abetting has to be tied to a specific terrorist attack, which is also what the text of the statute says.
All right, so that concludes our segment about that. That concludes that. And we have one more thing from SCOTUS, again from the SCOTUS blog, because they do really good work, and we like to share that information with y'all. So we're going to go ahead and allow them to speak about opinion days. And yeah, there's some opinions handed down, some 3 decisions. They're going to cover it in quick succession, 3 minutes or so. So let's go ahead and get to it as well.
Today at the Supreme Court, 3 opinions and 1 argued case about whether Twitter can be held responsible for aiding and abetting terrorism. Let's go. Interestingly, we got 1 5-4 decision and 1 6-3 decision, and in both, the court's 3 liberal justices were in the majority, and they reached outcomes that could generally be characterized as liberal results. First, an important decision for criminal defendants who claim that their rights are being violated. In a 5-4 decision, the court sided with John Cruz, a death row inmate from Arizona. Now, Cruz said that his due process rights were violated when he wasn't allowed to inform the jury during his trial that his life sentence would be without parole.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that would probably change. That might change some of people's sentencing thoughts about that. I could see that being a violation.
The Supreme Court had already said that states in capital cases had to inform juries whether defendants would be eligible for parole if they weren't getting a death sentence. Now, Arizona wasn't abiding by this rule. So then the Supreme Court said again, hey, Arizona, you have to abide by this rule and inform the juries. But Arizona then again was not adhering to the court's decision.
Yeah, Arizona, the things that had that sheriff Payo, come on.
So today, writing for a 5-justice majority, Sotomayor told Arizona to cut it out and sided with Cruz. Justice Amy Coney Barrett dissented, joined by Thomas Alito and Gorsuch.
You know what? I'm a little bit surprised that Gorsuch was the no. Okay. I mean, whatever.
Then the court sided with an oil rig worker who was denied overtime pay. This case involved the Fair Labor Standards Act, and a 6-3 court led by Justice Kagan said that certain highly paid workers who are paid by the day are entitled to overtime pay if they work more than 40 hours a week.
This is one of those Obama era, I'm pretty sure it's an Obama era regulation that encompassed people under certain things for more overtime pay as well.
And finally, a unanimous bankruptcy decision delivered by Justice Amy Coney Barrett. A California couple committed fraud when they sold their San Francisco house. Really, the husband committed fraud, but the wife got tagged with it because they had a legal partnership. The new owner found out, sued, and the couple got dinged for $200,000 in damages.
Man, that sucks.
They couldn't pay it. They filed bankruptcy to try and get out of paying it, something called a discharge. The wife in particular was like, I didn't know about this fraud, so I should certainly be able to get a discharge of the debt. Today, the Supreme Court unanimously said that the wife was prohibited from discharging the debt that was incurred by fraud, regardless of her culpability. I'm going to have to do a part 2 for the Twitter terrorism case.
Good, honestly, on that last one. Like, you're in it. You're till death do you part, man. I'm sorry if you were materially benefiting from fraud committed by your spouse, which is what happened in that case. You're liable to pay the damages of that. You know how you get out of that? A divorce. So sorry, but that concludes our segment about SCOTUS. We got other stuff to talk about today. And this stuff, this is some really juicy things that we alluded to earlier about Fox News. And of course, we're talking about the Dominion lawsuit against Fox News. So as everyone no doubt remembers, even before the 2020 election ballots were counted, the rhetoric of a rigged election began to circulate in right-wing media arena. Several outlandish conspiracy theories swirled through the internet and on TV screens about Dominion voting systems, a company that provides voting machines in districts across the country. In the weeks following Joe Biden's presidential win, media personalities on Fox News focused almost entirely on the false story that Dominion had engineered their voting machines to switch votes from then President Trump to Biden, a conspiracy theory that has been as old as electronic voting has been. And in response, though, Dominion followed a multi-billion-dollar defamation suit against various media outlets and individuals, among them a $1.6 billion defamation suit against Fox News and its infotainment host who pushed this conspiracy theory. According to reporting from The Guardian, the case centers around Fox News' reputation. According to reporting from The Guardian, the case centers on Fox News' repetition of Donald Trump's lie that his 2020 defeat by Joe Biden was the result of fraud, including the claims about Dominion voting machines. Dominion filed a brief last week. The 192-page document makes it clear that senior figures at Fox News, from Rupert Murdoch on down, knew immediately after the election that the claim of voter fraud, and specifically those aimed at Dominion itself, were false. Harvard law professor Lawrence Tribe said that the filing showed that Dominion's lawsuit is, quote, likely to succeed and likely to be a landmark in the history of freedom of speech and freedom of the press. Tribe said that the filings established that Fox was not only reckless, but also that the producers, owners, and personalities were, quote, deliberately lying, and knew that they were lying about the nature of Dominion's machines and the supposed way that they could be manipulated. Continuing on, quote, I have never seen a defamation case with such overwhelmingly proof that the defendant admitted in writing that it was making up information in order to increase its viewership and its revenues, Tribe told The Guardian. Continuing on, he stated, quote, Fox and its producers and performers were lying as part of their business model. The brief serves as Dominion's motion for summary judgment. Scott Horton, a Columbian law lecturer, Harper's Magazine contributing editor, and litigator with clients including CBS and the Associated Press, said that, quote, a summary judgment motion by a plaintiff in this kind of case is almost unheard of. These suits usually fail because you can't prove the company you're suing knew they were spreading falsehoods. That you could have evidence they knew it was a lie is almost unheard of. In this case, the sheer volume of emails and text messages is absolutely staggering. Professor Tribe agreed, quote, this is one of the first defamation cases in which it is possible to rule for the plaintiff on a summary judgment. This is not a request to go to trial. There is no genuinely disputed facts. The defendants were deliberately lying in a manner that was per se libelous, and they clearly knew it. When the Dominion filing was first reported, Fox News said that, quote, miscategorized the record, cherry-picked quotes, stripped of key context, and spilled considerable ink on facts that are irrelevant under black-letter principles of defamation law. Lawyers for Fox News claimed everything that their anchors said was protected by the First Amendment. I'm sorry, buddy, but lying, defaming, libel are not things protected by the First Amendment, no matter how big your pocketbook is and no matter how much of a reporter you think you are. If you commit damages, if you do damages to somebody's reputation, that is illegal. And our justice system, our legal system, gives people remedy through lawsuits in order to rectify those misdeeds. And that is what's going on here. So Fox News finally getting its comeuppance. All because little Tucker Carlson couldn't bear lose some fans. Look, man. It's just wild. It's wild. Hold on. I gotta bring up one of these freaking quotes, dude. Like, where is this? Where is this quote at? You know, I can find it on Twitters. I can find it on the Twitters. I'm gonna put this up. Come on. Where's some news? Where's some of the filing briefs? Oh man. Come on, man. It's looking up dominoes. Okay. All right, I'm not finding it as quickly as I was hoping, but we're going to continue on then. We're going to continue on. So, but other lawyers are a bit more skeptical. David Kozinski is a leading libel lawyer whose clients include The Guardian. He said the Dominion case shows it's possible to prove actual malice. If particular people are shown to have believed something to be false or to have been highly aware of its probable falsehood, and at the same time they made statements endorsing it on air, they are in play. You're allowed to be biased. You're allowed to try to make money. And people should be able to disagree with each other in a newsroom. But if Fox anchors say they don't believe X and then turn around and endorse X on air after expressing manifest disbelief in it, they have a real problem. Ironically, the filing reveals that Tucker Carlson and his colleagues decided that the greatest threat to the network was one of the only times it gave an accurate report, that Arizona had gone for Biden at 11:20 p.m. on election night. Rupert Murdoch initially defended the reporting, but later that day, as Fox executives realized they were losing viewers, the tide began to shift. Getting creamed by CNN, Murdoch messaged a Fox Corp executive. In a message to his producer, Carlson sounded terrified. Quote, Do the executives understand how much credibility and trust we've lost with our audience? We're playing with fire. For real, an alternative like Newsmax could be devastating for us. Even as they've privately acknowledged that the claim pushed by Trump's allies were false, Fox News hosts schemed to get a reporter fired for fact-checking those lies. They expressed concerns that exposing their viewers to facts about the election outcome was hurting the network's stock price. It's all about the Benjamins, baby. It's all about them big greenbacks. One section of the Dominion filing cited the bizarre source of one of the conspiracy theories aired by the network. Oh, I need to open this. One section of Dominion's filing cited the bizarre source of one of the conspiracy theories aired by the network. Days after the 2020 election, host Maria Bartiromo. Days after the 2020 election, host Maria Bartiromo interviewed Trump's lawyer and conspiracy theorist Sidney Powell, knowing she would respond with conspiracy theories about Dominion, according to the filing. The evidence came from a source in an email who pushed the Dominion conspiracy theory while also espousing a number of other bizarre claims. Turning over to that quote now, because we have it. So up here is, let's go ahead and zoom this in. So up here, Dominion's 192-page summary motion versus Fox News is just amazing. Here it says, is the email from the source who first put Sidney Powell onto the Dominion conspiracy theory. The wind tells me I'm a ghost, Powell's source wrote, but I don't believe it. Bartiromo. In addition to promoting lies about Dominion, the sender claimed that Justice Scalia was purposefully killed at the annual Bohemian Grove camp during a week-long human hunting expedition, and that the former Fox News CEO Roger Ailes, who died in 2017, and Rupert Murdoch, quote, secretly huddled most days to determine how to best portray Mr. Trump as badly as possible. Example 154 at this number, you can see that at. The author claimed, quote, "Who am I? And how do I know all of this? I've had the strangest dreams since I was a little girl. I was internally decapitated, and yet I live. The wind tells me I'm a ghost, but I don't believe it." The full force of the email's lunacy comes across by reading it in its entirety. That is just one of the emails that we saw from this. Just one. There's hundreds of pages. Chef's kiss. There's just so much good, juicy information on this. This is what I live for sometimes, because you do not get this level of insight until somebody with deep pockets sues somebody else with deep pockets. It's beautiful to see. It really is. Truly. So the trial, though, for the Dominion's $1.6 billion lawsuit is scheduled to begin in April. As that happens, we'll be sure to keep you updated, because the story is just going to keep getting weirder, and it's really good to finally see Fox News come to the court system in a way that it's going to actually hold it accountable for the bullshit that it spreads. When Trump said, hey, we need to open up libel and defamation laws in order to hit the press, who knew it would hit Fox News first? All I'm saying. But that concludes this segment, the News Roundup. Itchy nose. All right, so we got another news bite, and we're going to talk about an election denier to head Michigan GOP, because this is where they are as a party in many places. Despite the fact that the GOP got completely routed in Michigan, they're still putting up people that are the crazy of the crazy. So as if damage caused by the Republican Party by the revelations in the Dominion lawsuit isn't enough, Raw Story reports that the Michigan Republican State Party may all but cease to exist. That's because it decided on Saturday to entrust its future to the hands of election denier Christine Carmo as its new chairperson. Carmo was elected despite the fact that she just suffered a brutal rebuke from voters when she ran for Secretary of State in 2022's midterm election. With Carmo in place, political insiders and conservatives nationwide wonder if the party just signed its death warrant, since GOP donors are likely to withdraw their support in Michigan. According to the Bulwark editor Jim Swift, Michigan's Republican Party candidates suffered humiliating losses across the entire board for key government offices, led by Carmo's stunning 14-point loss to Democrat Jocelyn Benson in the midterms. Now it appears that the party is doubling down on the MAGA electoral strategy led by what he called losers. Objectively true, they lost. As Swift notes, it was not that long ago that Michigan appeared to be ripe for the taking by Republicans, until Donald Trump and supporters like Carmo came along and all hell broke loose. In 2016, Michigan Republicans had the state's governorship and 9 seats in the U.S. House of Representatives, while Democrats had 5 of the House seats and both seats in the U.S. Senate. Now, 7 years later, rising star Gretchen Whitmer is consolidating her power following a decisive re-election, he wrote. Continuing on, stated, quote, Democrats flipping both chambers of the state legislature, gaining 3 seats in the state House and 4 in the state Senate, producing a Democratic governing trifecta for the first time since 1982. In Congress, House Democrats now hold 7 seats to the GOP's 6, and the party still claims both of the state's U.S. senators. And he states, GOP donors have made it clear that they will sit on their wallets with political novice and all-purpose conspiracy theorist Carmo in charge. That blue wall that Hillary Clinton lost between Wisconsin, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, it's coming back to a degree. It's coming back to a degree on the backs of strong labor and strong local politicians. That is why we at the Roundup say that you should pay attention, especially pay attention to local races where you can make a difference, even if the national scene seems to not be within grasp. Michigan is a prime example of what can happen when you have strong representation and strong candidates, and how those things can work to the betterment of everyone. Remember that. There's still hope. So that concludes our segment about that. Now we are going to move over to the US economy. We try to talk about the economy every week unless we just got a deluge of information. And this week, we have enough space to include the economy, like we do most of the time. So we're going to talk about it now. So based on reporting from ABC News, the US economy expanded at 2.7% annual rate from October through, let me start that over. Based on reporting from ABC News, the US economy expanded at a 2.7% annual rate from October through December. A solid showing despite rising interest rates and elevated inflation. It means the economy grew by 2.7%. The government had previously estimated the economy grew at 2.9% annual rate last quarter. So it's been revised down a little bit, but not by much. The Commerce Department's revised estimate for the fourth quarter's gross domestic product, the economy's total output of goods and services, marked a deceleration from the 3.2% growth from July through September. Thursday's report also revised down the government's estimates of consumer spending growth in October through December quarter from 2.1% rate to 1.4% rate. That is more troubling. That was the weakest such showing since the first quarter of last year. More recent data, though, shows that the economy has since rebounded. Consumers boosted retail sales in January by the most in nearly 2 years, and employers added a surprisingly outsized number of jobs. The Federal Reserve is expected to keep raising its benchmark interest rate over the next few months, and to keep it at peak through year's end to try to defeat still high inflation. As we've reported on this program before, we believe that the Federal Reserve does not need to raise interest rates any further in order to beat back inflation. Disinflation has fully set in our view, and raising it further could start to have negative impacts, but we will see. Continuing on though, minutes from its last policy meeting released yesterday showed that all 19 federal officials favored raising rates at the next two meetings. Inflation measured year over year has cooled since its peak of 9.1% in June, having slowed to 6.4% in January. In today's GDP report, the government also sharply revised up its estimates of Americans' incomes in the fourth quarter. After-tax income adjusted for inflation, after-tax income, when adjusted for inflation, it jumped 4.8%, a much larger gain than the previous 3.3% estimate. The upward revisions reflected higher wages and salaries than was estimated earlier. On Friday, the government will issue a new report on inflation for January. That has the potential to rattle markets or shed more light on the forces currently affecting the economy. And according to MarketWatch, the U.S. has widely expected to slip into a recession in 2023 as the Federal Reserve tightens the screws. The Fed's plan to keep raising interest rates to snuff out inflation, putting an expansion that began in mid-2020 at risk. Consumers are still spending enough money to keep the economy afloat, though even at the softer fourth quarter rate. They've been aided by job security resulting from the tightest labor market in modern times. The unemployment rate stands near a 54-year low at 3.4%. Now, more forecasters think the Fed might achieve a so-called soft landing, taming inflation without a recession. And that concludes our segment on the economy. Now, if you have never watched the News Roundup, you don't know what comes next. What we're going to do next is a little segment we like to close out with called News of the Weird. In this News of the Weird segment, we're going to talk about a Komodo dragon and lunches. Let's go ahead and get into it. So this week's News of the Weird is about a Komodo dragon. They're unique and magnificent animals and apex predators in their environments. They only found in the wild of 5 Indonesian islands. There are between 3,000 and 5,000 of them alive today, and they are a species of monitor lizards. They have been described as one of the most aggressive and dangerous lizards on the planet. Komodo dragons can live up for 40 years and grow to 10 feet in length and 300 pounds in weight. They're one of the most aggressive hunters on the planet, and we'll see so on this next video. What? 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 It's just eating a pig. Like whole swallowed mouth, gone, gullet. Holy crap, that's a baby pig. Jeez. Wow. That's nuts. That's like how a python swallows, man. Poof. Pork. That's what that lizard's thinking. It's that Komodo dragon's thinking. He didn't see me coming. Just living his pig life, and this Komodo dragon comes out of nowhere and just swallows it whole. Man, even the camera person is like, bro, it's nuts. It's wild. But that's what we're talking about today, because nature is scary and fascinating. And this is just one of its great creations. But with that, everybody, I am sad to say that we are out of time. We know you liked what you heard because you stayed with us to the end, so please smash that like button for the algorithms. It really does help us out. We'd like to thank you all for joining us this evening. Without your input and banter, this would be a lot more boring, and we do this for y'all, so you make it worth it. Appreciate you joining us today. We also like to thank our producer, Nikki Adams, for creating this copy. And without her, this show would be a lot less. Like, probably not even exist. So, Nikki, thank you again for the copy. Really appreciate it. We do this show every Thursday, starting roughly at 10 p.m. or 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to roughly 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you can catch that every Thursday unless studied otherwise. We're doing other shows, and those are going to be more produced and not live shows. So be sure to check out our YouTube channel where you can find those and clips of news segments such as these in the future. And with that, everybody, as we say at Crowdsourced Politics, keep your head up through the political storm.